No, it's not coffee. It was a at Dunkin', and I thought, what a great way to store varnishes and other solvent-based finishes. So I put back in May, I put some paint thinner in. The gross weight at that time was just about 182 grams, and yesterday was about 179. So did it lose 3 grams? I don't think so. It's probably the scale. So if you run a little test in these kind of bags or other food storage bags, it might be a great way to store finishes. This holds about 3 quarts, a little bit more. If I were going to use it, I'd run a dowel here, just roll up the bottom and never have any air in the finish. So I think it's worth giving that more attention. Now, if you need to sand inside a deep vessel, here's a drill bit extension. The sanding pads just go into it, and then the drill block allows you to hold on while you're powering it with the electric drill or whatever. Some of you guys don't have air compressors to blow out something you need to blow out. Well, that goes on the end of my exhaust for my shop vac, and I plug the big end of it, probably 3/4 inch pipe, drilled a hole in it, but then it would keep popping off. So then I drilled some holes pointed backwards and got just enough air going out where I wanted it. Makes a great clean out of a hollow piece. I saw this one on the internet and gave it a try with some cotter pins and cotter keys. A way to sand inside a small hole. Now the only thing I had was 2-inch cotter keys, and I looked around and hardware stores don't have them in 2.5 inch and 3 inch, but Home Depot does. And for about $3, I bought maybe 5 2.5 inch and 3 or 4 3-inch. You can get in real small holes. Put that on the end of one of these, and you can get it anywhere you like. You cut little strips of sandpaper, cut the ends into little fingers, and you've got a great little sanding device. Any questions? Say that again?
Where's the bag come?
Oh, that was a Dunkin' Donuts coffee bag. I gotta believe most of these things are probably polyethylene, so I think they're probably safe in paint thinner. But if you're using other finishes, like a lacquer or alcohol, I would check those in whatever bag you want. Let them sit for a few weeks. Take them out. Maybe sacrifice the bag. Cut the bag open. See if it's slimy. And if it's not, you're probably safe to go.
Jack, Bogio. Did I pronounce that right? Bogio? All right.
I do a lot of resin work. And a lot of you already looking at some of this stuff. I stand next to
Look
this.
at enemy.
Yeah.
Don't actually work it 55.
That's a piece of wood, piece of purple heart. Made wood. Hard pressed not to tell it's not a real model. This is an in progress piece.
Well, thank you.
Not
Thank you
as
for
fast as
that
I
later.
made the model cells. But obviously resin with a bunch of shells in it. This is like a river table. It'll be a serving tray. and the handles are here for this when it gets finished. This one is a gift for Jim Dahl. Then a lot of the resin that I do is on turned objects, and this is a cremation urn. If there was 110 volt here, I could turn this on. This is a barbecue spit motor. Turns at about 3 RPM. You can use the bar top type resin finishes. Made it on there, it turns slow enough that the constant motion makes it flow out and end up perfectly smooth. This bottle was the first one that I ever did that on. And I thought, well, I'll do the resin finish and then sand it down and do another coat. And I do it at night, but last thing at the end of the day, because I don't want dust flying around it. It runs all night long. I got up the next morning, came out, and I found the bottle that was right off the bat. Made it with 2 coats of 50-50 water and wood glue. Let it dry, and that seals all the pores on the wood. Then when you put the resin on, 1 coat, and it's done. Now, I give a class in this occasionally in my shop.
So what did you do again? What did you prime it with and then coat it with?
The 2 prime coats are wood glue, 50-50 wood glue mixed with water. Paint it on, let it dry. Need a second coat, let it dry. And that seals all the pores. If you don't do that, you'll have spots that soak in. Looks like oil spots on it and stuff. But you do 2 coats of glue and 1 coat of finish will come out looking just
Do you do the white glue or yellow?
like that. They'll both dry clear. Yeah, 50-50.
And then what's the finish for that?
It's resin. The bar top type resin, you can get it at Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's.
Do you thin it?
Do I thin it? No. No, the constant motion, as it's going down on one side, the resin wants to flow down. But in a few seconds, it's coming back up on the other side, so the resin wants to flow back the other way. The constant back and forth motion, and it makes it just as smooth and slick as could be. There's no sanding or anything on that at all.
You painting on?
I use foam brush to put it on.
Put it on all the things?
I was turning.
Yeah, I have one of those as well. I'm just interested, how do you pass your walls to the end of that spin?
This is an 1.25 8 PPI shaft in the through here, so you chuck, and that's on a faceplate. Just spins right on. There's a nut in the back of it, so when you put the chuck on or the faceplate on, lock the nut against the faceplate because it could tend to unwind. That happened to unwind because it runs 10 hours overnight, 12 hours overnight, and some of these motors. This one is a little more expensive spit motor. It runs pretty smooth all the way around. Some of them, the way they're made, the shaft has one flat side on it for a key to lock into it. But the spindle that goes over it just has a dimple that kind of locks into that flat spot. So as it turns, the weight will make it pick up speed, and then it stops at the bottom, waiting for it to catch up. So it's not a smooth rotation. That can sometimes cause problems on resin.
What is the motor again?
Barbecue spit motor. Any barbecue spit motor will work. Like I said, some of them are a little bit loose. This one is actually a little bit noisy, but like I said, I do it at the very end of the day because I want all the dust in the shop. And it turns on and makes noise, but I leave it all night long. Come back the next day. And if there's any moisture at all, I'll move the light.
This is like the art side.
Bar top. This is the bar top stuff.
Two-part,
Yes, 2-part. 50-50, A and B, mixed two together.
you have to buy it by the gallon or the.
No, they have like smaller the quantity, more expensive.
So, your board, your plant board, gas and rock, also.
I can't quite hear.
The flat board.
Flat board.
No, This is a deep pour epoxy on the flat board. It takes 3 days to set up. So and I'll have that when I do the class. But it's, instead of a 50 mix, it's a 2-to-1. It's real watery when you put it on, but it's got to be 3 days. And this is done in a mold. So 3 days in the mold before it comes out. So a lot of those bubbles come out because when this stuff starts to react, it gets hot. And if you're using the pour-on resin and doing more than 1/8 of an inch thick, it can tend to get hot, and that heat will heat up any air pockets in the wood, push it right into the resin, and then they're stuck.
Joe Brinkman.
Sir. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is glue blocks. And there are a couple of different ways that I've seen glue blocks done over the years. And I'm going to talk about 2 that I use extensively for my tournament. And one is one that Lyle Jameson showed about 10 years ago at the club, which is nothing but medium CA glue. And he, at the time, used it on grain wood. I use it on dry wood. So I make sure that whatever glue block I'm using, that I have the highest point of the glue block edge of the glue block. And then I also will cut a small chamfer on the corner of the glue block, because when I want to separate these, I can use a small chisel. And one of the characteristics of super glue is that it's a very brittle glue, right? It holds, and I think we talked about this last month, it holds in the axial direction. It does not hold lateral force very well, and it will shatter. So a sharp blow on that joint with just a normal wood chisel will actually split that. Now, one of the things I don't like about super glue, about CA glue, is that it does tend to rip fibers either from the piece that you're turning or even from the glue block itself. So you're constantly, after you use it with each piece, you're refacing down that glue block, and you're slowly cutting away on your glue block. So I recently switched to using hot melt glue or hot glue. When you're using hot glue for this, make sure you get the high temperature hot glue, because there's 2 temperatures that hot glue normally comes at. So your glue guns, make sure you get the higher temperature, because you will get a stronger bond. And at first, when I started using it, it was a little bit of a problem, because now you've got this glue on here, and the question is, how do you separate it, right? And I was using a heat gun and trying to, remelt the glue effectively, and that just made a mess. And then I found this trick a couple months ago, maybe 6 months ago or so, that alcohol will break the bond of the hot glue. So I take a squirt bottle that I keep in my shop of denatured alcohol, and I squirt it around the edge of the hot glue where I've got it. It's not an instantaneous break of that glue joint, but it's enough that I can come back with either a chisel, or a lot of times I will use like a metal putty knife that's got a decent edge on it, and I can just work that in under the hot glue. It'll lift it up, and it will come up off the wood without taking any wood fibers, without damaging the wood in any way. So if I have a piece that I'm trying to turn on, and I care about whether or not I damage the resulting piece, I can use hot glue and get it back off and do that safely without damaging the piece. Where this becomes even more critical is if you've seen some of the pieces, and they come out, every year, especially around AEW symposium time. Some of the turners who are turning these really odd-shaped, multi-axis pieces, and you're wondering how in the heck they can hold that piece on the lathe. Some of those turners are using wood glue or hot glue to just glue those on. And they'll glue on sacrificial pieces, and they'll glue on other pieces to give it support where they need to. But being able to get that glue back off without damaging the piece underneath is part of the trick. It's part of the how can I do this safely. The one thing to note, as I use the hot glue, and I've gone through a couple of different learning lessons, is that be generous with the hot glue. Surface area matters. So I don't just do a couple of dabs around the outside. I make a solid ring around the outside of my glue block. Make sure I have good contact all the way around between the glue block and the piece that I'm gluing down. I have had them not completely come off, but I have had them separate, and I've had to stop, re-glue them down, and re-put them on. And it's always a case where I got too quick with the glue and I didn't put enough on. The stuff is cheap, so use them very generously.
Do you glue in between?
I do not glue in between. So I will put the glue block on, and I will just take the glue gun. And I like these because there's no cords, and I will just go around and make sure I've got a good bead all the way around the outside. And again, I chamfer the edge of my glue blocks, so I know that there's a nice little valley, if you will, between the two joints. But again, I always make sure that the high spot of my glue block is always around the outside edge. I don't want any dome on my glue block. I want a concave, or a convex, I should say, surface on that glue block, so that I know that outside ring is the part that's contacting my piece. Now, if I have an off-shaped piece, I might change that.
You're using anything special in terms of glue, on the glue,
No, I just buy either bag saw at a Home Depot. I use the high temperature stuff, or I order it off Amazon, and it's all just high temperature stuff.
So one of the ways we did glue blocks that I learned in high school was to take whatever you want to glue, put some Elmer's glue down, take a grocery bag, a paper grocery bag, put it down, put your glue block on it, clamp it, and then when you want to get it apart, you do the same thing with the chisel, and the bag splits out, you can stick it. How does that compare to?
So I would say that that's probably closer to using the CA glue, in that there's still residue and stuff that you have to clean up afterwards.
Right.
The other part that I didn't go down that path was drying time, right? So with the CA glue, the thing that's nice is I can put it on, put activator on, and within a couple of minutes, I'm turning. With the hot glue, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, and it's set enough. Usually I'll put it between the tailstock and just get things round, and by the time I'm ready to move on, it's more than set. But usually about 5 minutes, and you're even without a tailstock, you're okay to turn. Yes, sir.
My question is, layer two people or
Yeah, you just need anything in between the glue block and the block that itself can basically separate, right? Like that's why the CA glue works. That's why the paper works, because the fibers there, they're strong enough to hold while it's turning, but they can still be broken apart. The other trick, depending on what you're turning, is you can use things like double-sided tape. If you don't have double-sided tape, I've used just some blue tape on both my piece that I'm turning. I will put CA glue on the back of that tape and glue tape on the glue block, and that works as a double-sided tape. So you can use double-sided tape, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's real double-sided tape or it's two pieces of tape taped together. What you need is a good solid bond between the wood and the glue block, and you need enough surface area because that's the trick. It's the surface area of that glue that is what's going to provide enough hold for you to be able to turn. Now, if you're turning small things, ornaments, that sort of stuff, you don't need a lot of surface area. With the glue blocks I use, I've turned pieces. I just turned a 15-inch platter a month or two ago on a glue block. Right? So you can get fairly decent sized pieces, and it's about understanding the strength of the bond. Now, the 15-inch piece was one where I didn't get quite enough of the hot glue on, and I saw some separation and go back and re-glue that. But again, that leverage is like, right, as you get larger and larger pieces, the leverage on the outside edge of that piece, right, just think of it as a long seesaw or a long pole arm, right? The longer that gets from the center line of your lathe, the more forces you're going to exert on that glue block. So it makes your glue block bigger, or maybe use a different mounting method. But I've safely used this up to like 15-inch platter, so I feel very comfortable in either of these.
Now, there's on the other end, I got a face plate on one. I'm assuming that goes to the compression shop on the other.
Yeah, so this one I have goes into I think that's a 250 mil, 2.5 or 3 inch chuck on that one. And this one is just on a small base plate. I've got others that have a small base plate that are made for like the Supernova 2, which is just a ring that again attaches to the chuck, but it's still a base plate, of course. The method you use for mounting it to the lathe is less important than the joint that you're creating with the glue.
Well, just for the beat, if you gravitate one way or the other, so
Yes, I gravitate to whichever glue block I have. So I tend to have several projects going at one time, so I may or may not have my base plate open. I actually prefer, so to be more blunt, I prefer to use one that goes on the chuck. And I do that because I don't always want to tie up my glue blocks like the glue block. I don't always want to tie up the lathe, and I want to be able to get stuff off and immediately shift into the next piece. Or like in the case of a glue block, I could glue that on and immediately turn that piece over once I've got the foot in there, and turn that piece over and get it mounted on the lathe. And my glue block is still centered, right? And it's still on there in the same orientation. So that gives me more comfort with this than with this, because this, I don't like having this piece of metal with a lot of weight taken out here that make it. So this, I'm not. It's another piece of wood. It's not nearly as. And I actually have if I didn't want to put it on the chuck, I could also do a 1 1/4 8-inch tap, which I have. I tap a glue block just easily, but I tend to reuse the same glue blocks over and over again, which is why I wouldn't like that and why I moved completely to the hot melt method, because I'm not constantly wearing down my glue blocks every time I use them. With the C8 glue, I'm constantly cutting down another 16 inch every time I use it. So and for me, I don't have a lot of spare wood in my shop. I do, but it's not stuff that's even suitable for a glue block. So I don't want to waste any more than I need to. So I think I've got maybe 3, 4, 5 glue blocks that I rotate between.
that was my other question. In terms of the what type of wood is best used for glue block?
Whatever's too small to make a boulder or ladder. So I have walnut, I've got cherry, I think, on this one, I'll use maple on some of my others. I'm looking for something that's, nice and solid and hard, not punky, not soft in any way, no wormholes, right? Like you need a good solid piece of wood. You don't want something that is of questionable stability. So.
Do you leave the block square or you turn it around?
I turn all my glue blocks around, just because it's easier to get a flat, planar surface on a round, right? When I turn this thing and I turn that concave in there, then I know that outside ring is going to connect even on a round piece. I can still put a glue block on it. If I go square, now I have 4 corners, trying to make sure that all of those are in a single plane and what pieces are actually in contact with the piece I'm trying to glue up against. That just becomes a lot more problematic. With a round piece on a lathe, that's easy to make. So.
Mike Nagel, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to start with first tip is anyways, I'm gravitating for my tool handles to use ones where you don't glue the tool in. This one is from Doug Thompson. Stick it in here like this, and you use set screws to hold it in place. And that's okay. I use the Allen keys in shavings, so I'm trying to design this little nut with a wooden wagon wheel from Pat Catan's. I put that in there. It allows me to tighten this in place without need of finding the Allen key. So I kind of like that. I don't know if you can see that clearly. Then, even one step better, which I really like, with this collet tool holder from Jimmy Clues. Again, Doug Thompson makes these, but Jimmy Clues is the only one that sells them. And they're made specifically for Thompson tools. Maybe this should fit in there. It's fit in there yesterday.
That one go
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I really like this one. I can't say it works for every tool that I have, but these are 5/8 shafts, and it's really convenient to put this in there, take it out, sharpen it, put it back in, or put in a different tool that's already sharp. So I really like these tool handles. Again, I turn the wooden handle, epoxy in the inserts from Doug Thompson or Jimmy Clues, and I really think it's the way I'm going to go in the future. This one is the same. It's a Doug Thompson collet, and it's got 2 set screws. And the only thing I did to change it, you can keep on using those set screws, they're fine. I just am too impatient to find the goddamn Allen key every time. And so I made this little thing for this.
Speedway Tools makes those belts.
My next tip is 180 grit sandpaper. And I want to go to the board here. This is what I was taught. This is what I was taught when I was first starting out, and I ignored it for almost 10 years. But you're supposed to, if you don't, how do you decide which sandpaper to go for? If you're starting with 80 grit, I know that Rick starts with 36 grit, but it still works for that. Anyways, you divide the grit you're using by 2. You add that to here, so 80 plus 40 equals 120. So you go from 80 grit to 120 grit. 120 divided by 2 is 60, so you're supposed to go to 180, and then you can go to 240 or 220. But I, being a non-believer in this method, for 10 years I went directly from 120 to 240, and then on to 320, etc. Recently, I started using 180 grit between 120 and 240, and I tell you, I can't believe I waited 10 years to do that. Really much faster, not skipping. So, anyways, don't make my mistakes. My last topic is how to turn wood black. This piece here is pine. Date is on 2012. It's one of my first hollow forms I ever made. Pine. It's very thick walls at the bottom. But what I did was I sandblasted it and then painted it black with black acrylic paint on the outside, red on the inside. But basically, I wanted the black color. I saw something in the AAW journal and I wanted to try to reproduce it. But anyways, that's it. The easiest way to do it. It costs 50 cents for the pack contains to buy a little bottle of acrylic paint. Trouble with acrylic paint is that it's very, very uniform. It's almost the same everywhere. So you have to have a lot of texture in your wood to see anything interesting. This is a recent piece. This is also pine. This one, I fully turned. Actually, there were some cracks, especially in all these knot holes or knots. But I decided wasn't that thrilled with it. So what I did was I put a torch in this. I did it with a propane burner, handheld burner, and I turned it black. Produced like, I don't know, almost a 16th inch of charcoal type surface on this. Then I brushed it off with a wire brush, put a couple of coatings of Danish oil on it, and then I buffed it, via buff. I really like how it turned out. I hope you guys saw it on the show and tell table. I really think it came out nice. So anyways, again, you can feel the grain showing up because the summer wood resists burning more than the winter wood or vice versa. But anyways, the texture produced with burning is very, I think, quite interesting looking.
You think you did the same thing in that hardwood?
I have tried hardwood. I've tried cherry. I've burned cherry, and after touching it up, it polished up and it looked like ebony. Really impressed. So I can't guarantee I could do it twice in a row, but it was pretty nifty. I'm going to try it again. The last way that I experimented with is using ebonizing solution. The main one that I use, homemade, you could use black dye. Very common people use leather dye, black leather dye. But I use white vinegar mixed in with steel wool. This leftover jar, chopped garlic. Basically, the piece of steel wool, I put some water, I moisten the steel wool, let it dry so it begins to rust. Put it in this jar, put it about, fill it up halfway with white vinegar, seal it up. In about a week, it's ready to go. Then I'll drain off all the little bits and pieces of leftover steel wool out of it. Then I paint the piece with that solution. Now, this is maple. If you look on the inside, it's brown, the standard maple color, light brown. And after putting it on, you see a real nice texture. It's not black, it's gray, because maple is, doesn't have as much tannin as, say, oak wood. or walnut. But basically, if you use a weak solution, you get light gray. Use a darker solution or multiple coats, you get darker and darker gray. And I just think it looks great. It's almost like applying a dye. So then after it, so I will sand it to like 320 grit. I'll soak it with this vinegar solution, maybe 1 or 2 coats until I get the black degree of the darkness I want. And I sand it with 400 grit and I'm ready to go. Put a finish. These are 2 other pieces with the same thing. This one, you can see it's quite dark. But this is a little bit lighter because I used a weaker solution on purpose. This one is spalted maple, and I think it really shows up the curl. There's some curly figure here, and the black zone lines from the spalting plus the darkness from the ebonizing solution. I think it's pretty nifty. This is the same wood as this spalted maple piece. I want to point out that I had some cracks in this one. And I tried to seal the cracks with CA glue, and where I had to sand it smooth, I ebonized it first, then sealed the cracks. And then when I sanded it smooth, I exposed the bare wood. I sanded through the ebonized, the darkened wood. And so when you look at this closely, you'll see some around the crack. You'll see like a layer that is whiter than it should be. So I'm not sure I can ever fix that. I have to live with that. But anyways, these 2 are not completely done. They just haven't had any varnish or top coat put on it. But anyways, you can tell that you can see the effect you can get with the ebonizing solution. So I think it's very pleasing. So that's all I got.
I'm a walk-on because I didn't sign up. I have a quick couple of ideas on sanding. Some of you have heard this before. I typically start with about 120, occasionally 100, but I go 120, 150, 180, 220, 320, 400 in sequence. And if you're fortunate enough to have a reversing lathe, it would be wise to reverse the lathe on each grit. Because if you think about it, when you're sanding, you're bending the fibers over in one direction. And if you're continuing the same rotation, you're simply bending those fibers over each time. If you reverse the lathe on each grit, you bend the fibers one way, then the next grit, you bend them back. And especially on end grain, you'll get a much better finish that way. The second tip that I have is if you are power sanding and hand sanding, power sanding will give you scratches that look like this all the way around. Hand sanding, the scratches will be circular. So if you alternate back and forth, again, you can see exactly when these are gone, hand sand. From here you go back to power sanding. Each time you can identify the scratches much easier.
Rick Weinberg. First of all, I want to thank Ron Seeloff. When Joe Winkman was talking about glue blocks, and Ron asked about the paper bag in between the glue block and the work, he didn't bring up the fact that I glued some stuff up for Art Leisman demo and for so in class session. And one of the bags that I used blew up on Ron right during the class. And it was a Giant Eagle bag, and he said, just don't use Giant Eagle bags. Thanks for forgetting that. Okay, I have one thing that concerns the green grinding system. I see a lot of old timers here, so this is going to be old hat to you. But for the new people out there, when you get one of these, I would recommend
get self-stick tapes and you stick it on here permanently. It doesn't matter where you start, just get it on here. And then we have one guy here for sure that has 6 or 8 grinders. I'm not going to mention his name. He has 6 or 8 grinders, each has 2 wheels. So he is set up to grind maybe 12 or 16 different tools without doing it. He just walks over to them. But again, I won't mention who's I only have 1 grinder. So what I do is when I have the tip of a certain tool, the way I want it, it's up here, it's just the way I want it. I make a note of where the tape is crossing the stand. Just a little file card as each of my tools on it and the distance that is working for me right now. I might have to change, I want to change a few degrees here and there. But I grab the tool, stick it, of course, it's a Thompson tool, it's going to stick out 1.75 inches. If it's David Ellsworth, it might be 2, and I'll show you one that's 3 also. But at any rate, we grab the right bear grind jig, put it in there, you've made a note, and you just match whatever your note says. Make any sense?
That's a good idea.
Second one's a continuation. Pete Wade and Tom Olichuk gave a very good class on 40-40 grind, and I really liked it. But I don't freehand sharpen very well at all. So I found out that there's a guy named Ron Brown. There's a website, Ron Brown's Best. It's pretty simple. And he sells for $25 this device, which you use on your platform. You put your platform up to set 40-degree angle. This is touching the wheel. This is on your platform. I'm sorry, this is on your platform here. When you get this to match, lock the platform in place there. And then, if you want to spend the money, I think these might be $40, $50 or so. You buy another one of these, because the first one, Doug Thompson said, don't ever change the setting. Leave it there for whatever of mine you sharpen, just leave it there. So I listened to Doug. So I bought another one of these and set the bear grind at a much different angle. And once again, this piece sets the length for you. You just put your gouge in, push it in here. It's going to be 3 inches instead of 2. You don't have to take it over to whatever block of wood or whatever you use to set the distance on your other gouges. There, you set that up. You lock this in place and get the 40-degree grind just like you want it. No facets all over it. Like if I ground it for you, you'd see hundreds of facets. Make a note what the distance is on your arm. So the next time you duplicate it, you just get your 40-40 gouge into the right tool or holder and set the distance, whatever you wrote down, and you should be in the ballpark easily. Last thing he gives you, Ron Brown, is without George, gives you this little riser block that you put in the arm, and it raises this up so that your handle will clear back of the arm. If you can picture that, if your Wolverine running your system is the same as mine, you may hit your handle if you have to use the handle without the thing that comes with it. It really makes it snap.
I only have two small tips. Number one, with your CA glues, I have a little refrigerator in my shop. You keep your CA glues in your refrigerator, it'll last a lot longer. I've got bottles that I bought from the Buckeye Club, because they have sales on that stuff all the time. And I've had it in there for 2 years. And the other day, I had a bottle that had been sitting in the shop for quite some time. And I went to use it, and it was thin CA glue, but it was like jelly, and I couldn't even get it out of the container. And I went to my, I said, oh, I'm in trouble. I don't have it anymore. And I went to my refrigerator, and I know it's been 2 years. You guys haven't met for almost 2 years. And it was still good. So I'm not going to guarantee that it's going to work for everybody. The only other thing I have as far as sanding is concerned, and some of you may have seen the Glenn Lucas demo, IRD, and I learned it from him. Most of us power sand today, and if you have a ball, if you have a ball, the grain is running one way, obviously. So when you're sanding, this is side grain, this is end grain. And you always get this one area right there on both sides, between the side grain and the end grain, that you just can't get. And Christine Hendricks from Tionesta, Pennsylvania, I think she's still a member here, if I'm not mistaken. She's a member of the Lake Erie Club. She calls me all the time. Ron, I can't get that out. What do I do? I said, well, you power sand or hand sand. It doesn't make any difference. It's going to be there either way. She said, I tried it all. It doesn't work. I said, well, the lathe is spinning as you're doing your power sanding or hand sanding, whatever. I said, stop the lathe. I do nothing but power sand. Stop the lathe and sand those two areas by themselves without the lathe moving. Just sand that area till you get rid of that on both sides. And this comes from a professional, Glenn Lucas in Ireland. It works. Turn your lathe back on and continue power sanding, and those two areas are gone. They're clean. Now, I don't know what causes that. You probably know more about it than me as far as, but it's just the difference between your side grain and your end grain. And it's either, I think it's just before. Yeah, it's just before you go around. Those are the only two things I have. It's a good idea to take everything in your shop, every piece that you do, every piece that you bring into your shop. Put a little note on it, the date you got it, where you got it from. Because somewhere down the road, you're going to want to maybe thank somebody for it. I know when people give me pieces big enough to do hats, I do a full-size hat and I do a mini hat, I will give the person who gave me the wood one little mini hat. And mini hats I do in about an hour, 15 hours, 20 minutes. And it's just a gesture, thank you for the wood. 2 years from now, you look at it, oh, damn, I think I got that. I'm not sure. So if you have little notes on it, and then it helps you as far as drying. I date everything when I put it in my homemade kiln. And it's usually about 5 to 6 weeks after it's in the kiln, I bring it out, it's ready to finish turning, finish the product. So give it whatever you're going to do. So I date everything.